We shall fight in the field.
Mit der Akzeptanz der
C'est pas parce que les
vier
Britanniques
Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört
ont
auch
décidé
die
de sortir qu'ils ne doivent pas
Freizügigkeit
être
der
associés à ce
Personen.
processus.
Brexit means Brexit.
Hello and welcome to another Brexitometer. It's been a while since we last met, actually around 2 months, and it's fair to say things have changed quite a bit since the last time we've met. Today I'm coming to you from my house. As everyone else nowadays, we're all doing our videos from home, practicing social distancing. So it's not really a Brexitometer as much as a COVIDometer, I suppose. And I would really like to say this is a very special episode, but something tells me that where we are right now is the new normal in our lives. So where are we with Brexit? Does anyone even care about Brexit anymore? I mean, we are slowly becoming more accustomed to the pandemic, I think. I mean, we're slowly trying to see what life would be like after this first emergency, this first quarantine. So slowly Brexit will start appearing again. Already the day that I'm recording, Michel Barnier had made some statements about where we are with Brexit. So another Brexitometer. Let's try to catch again the thread and see where we are with Brexit and where we are in British politics as we try to make sense of this new pandemic world. So another episode of the Brexitometer. So where are we with Brexit, actually? What we are seeing, obviously, over the last few weeks is that Brexit has completely disappeared from the front page news here in the UK, in Europe as well. Obviously, both sides have much more important things on their plate right now. Of course, it doesn't help also that two of the main figures on both sides of the negotiations, Michel Barnier on the one hand and Prime Minister Boris Johnson on the other, actually contracted the actual coronavirus, so they had to be out of commission for a while. Negotiations are now starting to pick up steam again. They were taking place over the internet. The main question that we have to ask, kind of the big question about where we are with Brexit right now, is what will happen to the extension? What will happen to the transition period? So the transition period, as you know, is set to end on the 31st of December 2020. It was already a very tight deadline to meet. Even under the best of circumstances, people were wondering whether the two sides would be able to come to an agreement before then. Now, of course, even more so. They have wasted now so much time because COVID disrupted everything. Most observers of Brexit here in London agree that any sane, normal government would agree to a further extension. It would be the natural thing to do, and many people say that this might actually be, COVID could be the good excuse the government needed to backtrack on its promise to deliver Brexit on the 31st of December. However, my advice to people looking at Brexit from Europe is don't underestimate the ability or don't underestimate the willingness of this government to turn the conversation to Brexit. Remember, this is a government that won in December on the question on Brexit. This is a government of Boris Johnson who has made his career and his ability to become Prime Minister through Brexit. It is not self-evident that the government will admit to an extension of the transition period, and even if it does, it will probably go down to the wire and it will absolutely make a big fuss about agreeing to an extension. So, an extension on the 31st of December, don't count on it. We will need to go through a lot of different stages in this episode to actually see an extension happening. So what has the pandemic showed about Brexit? Has there been any connection between the two? I think that what we've seen over the last couple of months with regards to the pandemic actually has an interesting Brexit twist, in that in some cases it shows what life will be like for the UK once it is outside of the EU. And it's fair to say that the first few signs of a fully independent UK are not all that encouraging. The first is one of the main problems that the British government has had in managing the pandemic, which is its inability to provide health workers, nurses and doctors with personal protective equipment, so-called PPE, masks and aprons, things to protect them from the virus while they're treating patients. And unfortunately, there have been many cases of medical staff that have gotten sick and died because of the lack of personal protective equipment. Now, a few days ago, it was leaked to the press that actually the UK government had the opportunity to be part of EU-wide project to bulk buy PPE, personal protective equipment, but it decided not to participate in that. There were various excuses about it. They even said that there was some kind of bureaucratic glitch. Somebody forgot to write an email. The EU said that the UK is always welcome to be part of its project to bulk buy equipment for all of its members. However, there were also some leaks to the press that said that actually it was a very conscious political decision by the government not to cooperate with the EU in buying equipment. Now the UK has a major lack of equipment. It's trying to buy some from Turkey actually, but this was the first sign of what it means for a country to be outside of the EU. If it was a conscious political decision, it definitely backfired, and it showed how at times of crisis not being able to lean on important partners and neighbors can actually have major costs. The second part of the Brexit project that seems to come under negative light in light of the COVID pandemic is immigration. So many people from the EU, so many EU citizens work at the NHS, the National Health Service. So many of them offer valuable services to the British economy and the British health now. It was very, very symbolic that in his message after he came out from hospital, Boris Johnson thanked two nurses. One of them was from New Zealand, but another was from Portugal, an EU member state. So how exactly is the British government going to justify its new, much draconian immigration regime after Brexit? Supposedly it wants to attract high-skilled migrants, but now we see how those supposedly low-skilled but so valuable people that keep our economies and our lives running and our healthcare systems running at times of crisis, how necessary, how needed they are. So the immigration aspect of Brexit also will come under scrutiny once the first phase of the pandemic is over. And who knows, Boris Johnson, being so grateful towards the people who saved his life, as he says, he may take a new look at his so-called new post-Brexit immigration regime. So we'll have to wait and see. But the first signs of a post-Brexit future for the UK in light of the pandemic, not so encouraging. One of the major dimensions of the pandemic is the economy. As anywhere else in Europe, the UK is also experiencing, as we speak, a major recession. Supplies are being disrupted. Consumption patterns are changing radically. Initially, the British government won plaudits because it presented a very ambitious package of supporting the economy, supporting businesses, and supporting employment. However, as days go by and the depth of the economic crisis becomes obvious, more and more the ability of the British government to support the economy in a post-pandemic context comes into doubt. There's more reports of various sectors of the economy, airlines or universities asking for more support and the government not providing it. The crisis, the economic crisis from the pandemic is just going to be way too big, not just for the UK, but for all developed economies, that really the ability of government to plug the holes is going to be very, very limited. So this is where the debate comes about when exactly are we going to move out of the lockdown. As in so many other European countries, also in the UK, we're at the stage where governments debate amongst themselves what are we going to do, when to lift the measures. In the British government, we actually seem to have two different sides. The British press calls them hawks and doves. There's the side that really wants to continue the lockdown for as long as necessary for health purposes. Not surprisingly, Boris Johnson now is firmly in favor of keeping the lockdown for as long as necessary after he himself having experienced the effects of the virus on his body. But there are many other people, and particularly members of parliament of the Conservative Party, who are under the influence and pressure of lots of economic interests to loosen the lockdown and to let the economy breathe again. The government is in a bit of a bind because while there's many people who are suffering major economic losses and they're pressuring for a loosening of the lockdown, actually the public, according to most opinion surveys, the public seems really happy with the lockdown because it saves lives. And the attitude of the public seems to be, it's not great, but we're getting used to it and we can go on with it for as long as necessary if it's good for public health. So the government is now in a bind where it's not really clear who exactly is going to be happy if it decides to lift the lockdown. And it's also not sure that even if the government releases some measures, people are going to be super happy to go out to pubs and theaters and cinemas. The British government should be prepared, probably all governments in Europe should be prepared for a major economic dip over the summer. Whether we'll be able to get out of it from September onwards, perhaps with the second wave of the pandemic coming in, it's really very questionable. So this was the first Brexitometer. I wouldn't call it post-pandemic, it's probably the first pandemic Brexitometer. I think we're going to be in this for quite some time to come. Frankly, at this point, Brexit feels like a meaningless distraction. I don't think anyone has really the energy to think much about it. But as I said, we slowly have to come to terms with what it is that we're living with here, and lots of other things in our lives, in politics and the economy, will have to move ahead. What's certain is that once the UK and the EU come back to the business of Brexit, both of them will look much different than what they did merely 2 months ago. Both will probably be very much traumatized, both in a humanitarian sense with lots of deaths, and in an economic and perhaps even a political sense. The EU is not in great shape now either, bickering amongst itself about how to manage the economic effects of the pandemic. But in any case, at some point, Brexit will resurface, either because it will go ahead or because both sides will agree to defer it. In either case, it's going to be pretty important for the EU as well. And of course, the Brexitometer will be here to give you all the answers. You can always send me your questions using the hashtag Brexitometer on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time, I usually say to you, take care, but this time I really mean it. Take care, stay safe, stay healthy, stay at home if you must in your country, and let's try to go through this together. Take care.
We shall fight in the field.
Mit der Akzeptanz der
C'est pas parce que les
vier
Britanniques
Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört
ont
auch
décidé
die
de sortir qu'ils ne doivent pas
Freizügigkeit
être
der
associés à ce
Personen.
processus.
Brexit means Brexit.